your name? Don't you play this game? You from another land, got you like it's contraband. Tell me what's your name? Don't you play this game? You from another land, got you like it's contraband.
What's up, guys? Keyshawn Uchiha here, back at you with another new goddamn alternate universe video. Now, this is going to be an 18x, and I'm not bullshitting you. This is going to be legit an 18x. So I will give out the wording because this is how I'm going to let y'all know I'm serious. Warning: this will contain sex, gore, blood, atheist, devil worshipping, and you could say a lot of sinner shit. If you're a Christian, you do religion, you pray to the Bible every day, you wake up, be a good noodle, be a perfect saint, please hop off this video and get the fuck out the kitchen because this shit is gonna get spicy. But if you're the opposite and you want to hear all this shit, please stick around and come see the spicy stuff. But other than that, let's get started. So what would what if be about? What is this alternate universe going to be about, you could say? This is going to be, what if Deku was a sinner? Now, what do I mean by a sinner? Is it by him doing something wrong and then he do this? No, this is going to go a little bit deep. He's going to basically become a sinner, but he's going to be, we're just going to say, a villain in this. Maybe, or you could say a half villain, half hero, maybe, or depends on what I do with it. But hold on, sorry, I had to put do not disturb. But anyways, let's continue. This will pretty much be what if Deku was a sinner, and let's just get started. So, how we start this off? We start off with Deku basically being born. Everything happens the same. He doesn't have a quirk, and he just pretty much is pretty much the same. Gets a bully all the way to the point, but the bully is a little bit more worser, you could say. Now, this is where Deku begins to start being depressed, you could say. Being depressed. Not as, oh, depressed I'm going to commit suicide, but depressed of, tired of this bullying shit. This is where Deku begins to start drinking and smoking. Yes, I know. Drinking and smoking. That doesn't seem that bad. What's so bad about it, Keyshawn Uchiha? You didn't let me finish. Now, this is where Deku will start hanging out with parties and stuff, and he's not going to be like one of those popular people who like hangs out with people, like hang out with cool kids and stuff. No, he's going to be the opposite. He's going to be the loner, as he's still going to get bullied, and he lacks the spine chill and stuff, you could say. And he pretty much listens to whoever tells him what to do, as long as they treat him right, you could say. So he's kind of like those people. Like, oh, I'd do anything, as long as as long as you're my friend, you could say. Now, this is where you could say Deku pretty much hangs out with the wrong crowd, and we're not going to start the interest in him or any of that. We're just going to start him between his high school days before we get all the way to the papers and all that. Now, this is where pretty much Deku is hanging out with the wrong crowd and stuff, and pretty much we're just gonna say he cuts himself. Not too deep, but he cuts himself because he wants to die, but he's too pussy to kill himself, so yeah, we're gonna say that. Now, this is where Deku pretty much is hanging out with the wrong crowd, pretty much smoking, because they say, hey, smoking makes you cool and stuff, and and we're friends, and Deku says, yeah, pretty much all that. This is where Deku is pretty much smoking, drinking, and this is where we're gonna say one time, one of his associates or people thinks, using Deku and stuff, and testing out drugs and stuff, because Deku also used drugs because he wants to get attention. Pretty much this is where one of them is saying, hey Deku, which one of the boys is saying, are you a virgin? Which Deku is blushing real hard and looking down and stuff, saying, yeah, he's pretty much is. Not gonna lie, he's admitting being a little good noodle. And they pretty much say, well, we have a girl who pretty much takes your virginity, which Deku says, oh, that's not necessary, which they say, oh, come on, I know you want some, which pretty much Deku, like I said, doesn't have a strong spine, and pretty much, goes for it. This is where Deku loses his virginity. At first, she says he's doing, not good, and she starts saying, well, put it in the middle of her vagina, you could say. Now, this is where Deku pretty much is doing it right, and he pretty much done it in the sauce in the vagina, you could say. Now, he didn't wear no protection, so he may or may not, you could say. He may or may not. But pretty much this is where Deku pretty much is still hanging out with the wrong crowd. And this is where one time the crowd pretty much hangs out, asks Deku to come with them to hang out to the certain place. This, shitty party. Which Deku, like I said, is trying to get attention, goes with them. Now this is where he pretty much is smoking and walking with them and stuff. And he's pretty much talking to him, and they're pretty much saying this party's gonna be great and shit. And this is where Deku goes into the party. Now, as Deku's going into the party, this is a bunch of drug addicts, alcoholics, and stuff. People who not looked at, not looked good at the minute, like at the good eye of men of society. Those people. This is where Deku is pretty much partying and stuff with them. And Inko is calling Deku's phone, and Deku's not answering. Like, he hasn't been, like, Deku, he has been going to school, but he hates going to school because Bakugo been bullying him a lot, so Deku just gave up on school. He still studies, but he just doesn't go to school, you could say. He still keeps his morals of, studying and wants to be the number one hero. This is where Deku's pretty much partying and stuff, and Inko's calling him, which he's not picking up, and this is where a couple dealers are making deal in the room, and it goes south. Like, it goes bad south. This is where one of the dealers brings a knife out, stabbing another guy, and shooting start happening. This is where Deku is high off drugs and on alcohol and stuff, is pretty much trying to figure out what the hell is going on. And he hears gunshots, but he has slow reaction. This is where one of the shooters shoots out, and it pretty much hits Deku. Pretty much this is where he shoots Deku, and he gets shot a couple of times. This is where he hits the ground and begins to start dying. As he's dying, this is where his soul is pretty much not reaching up to heaven, but pretty much reaching out to hell. Now, as it's reaching out to hell, this is where the paramedics are coming in and stuff, and Deku's body is still there for a reason. But we're going to switch back to Deku falling in hell. Now, as Deku's falling in hell, he's pretty much screaming and stuff, and he hits the ground really hard. Pretty much, like, coughing up a little blood. Now, as he's looking down in hell, he's pretty much looking around, and he pretty much sees, well, I don't know what hell looks like, but he pretty much, we'll just say what hell looks like. Just put it in your imagination what it could be. But pretty much, this is where Deku looks around, and he sees he's in hell, which he's kind of scared, but he realized that this is where he belongs because he know what he was doing, and he wasn't doing that great. But this is where one of the demons, well, I'm going to say one of the demons begins to start coming at Deku. Now, this is where Deku begins to start getting attacked by demons, and they pretty much rips him to shreds, and they pretty much put his flesh back together. And they're pretty much doing it over and over again, and Deku is screaming in hell. Now, the earth and hell is too different, so Deku getting tortured about 100 days. Well, 1 year, he gets tortured. Now, this is where the demons are pretty much throwing Deku out of the torturing thing, and pretty much Deku is already lost his sanity and stuff. This is where Deku is pretty much, walking around and stuff, and as he pretty much, walking around in a daze and in his sanity going crazy, this is where he sees a needle, and as he's about to hit himself with a needle, this is where one of the you could say sinner nuns, pretty much stops Deku and tells him that's not a good idea, which pretty much is what Deku sees her, and he freaks out saying, "Who the hell are you?" and stuff, and begins to start curling up. This is where she says, "Oh, you poor child. Those demons pretty much got you good," which pretty much Deku is freaked out. But this is where she offers up her hand and pretty much says, "There now, come with me, and I shall save you from this torment," which pretty much Deku has no other option because he doesn't want the demons to get him again. He goes with the Cinder Nun. Now, as he's going with the Cinder Nun, she pretty much explains to him what their core originally is, and pretty much she shows him the opposite Bible, you could say. It's like the Bible, but opposite, you could say, the Cinder Bible. And pretty much she reads to him a scythe and stuff, and begins to start teaching him of how he can channel his souls and stuff, and what he can do. This is where she pretty much explains to him that he can get stronger and pretty much get out of hell and get back to his original body. But what he has to do is pretty much, he has to do the impossible. He has to pretty much steal other life forms from demons and other things. Which pretty much, this is where Deku begins to listen to her and says, okay. And she says, but this is where it's going to take 2 years to pretty much get that soul training. Which Deku says, alright. Now, we switch to Deku's body right now. This is where Inko is pretty much crying because she sees her son in the hospital and his body is in a vegetable state as his brain is still like breathing, but he's pretty much in a coma. You could say in a coma. So this is, yeah. He's pretty much in a coma at this stage, and she is just devastated of what happened to her son. But let's switch back. This is where Deku is pretty much learning and channeling his power and stuff with the Cinder Nun. And the Cinder Nun is pretty much saying to Deku that now is his chance to pretty much grab a demon soul and pull out the sword of Excalibur. Which Deku's saying, Excalibur, ain't that supposed to be at some other place? Which she explains to him like, no, there's 2 different Excaliburs. There's the Holy Excalibur and there's the Sinner Excalibur, or the Excalibur where Lucifer put half of his angelic grace in it. He's gonna need it to pretty much defeat the sinners and get their power, get some of their power, or to get their power. And pretty much this is where Deku agrees, and he begins to take one of the pretty much go to the Excalibur, and he begins to start pulling it out. Now, as he's pulling it out, this is where it's pretty much taking some of his life force, and I'm just gonna say his soul life force, as if he lose, as the nun says it, if he lose all his soul life force, he begins to just become a hollow, kind of like Dark Souls, a hollow that's nothing more but just a soulless thing that doesn't do anything. And if you torture it, it doesn't really work on it. So, and it would just keep coming back as a soulless husk. Now, this is where Deku feels half of his life force fading away, but he begins to pull it out, and he feels the power channeling through him. He's feeling the angelic grace, but also the opposite of it too. And he's about to go insane again until he focuses and he says, all right, it's time to go. Now, this is where, as he's going to hell and stuff, this is where he goes and meet this thing. And we're just gonna call it the Unforgiving Sinner thing. So the Unforgiving Sinner Gallo. Now, this is where the Unforgiving Sinner Gallo is pretty much is just there. This sitting at the seat, and Deku looks at it, and it begins to start speaking to Deku, saying, so the Sinner Nun is having you as the one. Which Deku says, what do you mean? Which, this is where he says, the one to defeat the sinners and get yourself out of heaven. You're not the first one who tried it. Many have failed, but I think you can do it. Which, this is where Deku says, okay, where the fuck am I supposed to go? Which Deku begins to start cussing at it, because, like I said, Deku's soul is not pure anymore. It's different now, since he's been there for 3 years. So yeah, and channeling his soul, and also absorbing demon souls, and also get it, demon souls. But pretty much, demon souls, also a couple other souls. So his soul is not pure anymore. So this is where Deku is pretty much pulling out a cigarette, smoking, and saying, so, are you going to tell me? Which, pretty much, this is where the Unforgiving Sinner Gallo is pretty much speaking to Deku, saying, well, ain't you have the tongue, but I should tell you where all the sinners at. Now, this is where he explains to where each destination of the sinners are at. So, and he said it's about to take about a couple more years, which Deku says, well, it's not like I have somewhere else go in a hurry, so I might as well get going then. Which this is where Deku sticks up the middle finger at the Gallo and saying he be going now, which the Gallo says, so he is the one to become the Antichrist. Which pretty much Lucifer, I'm just gonna say Lucifer, is pretty much looking through his thing and saying, so he's the one who the sinner none can forsake for troll to see for troll to see that he's going to be the sinner to take over the earth instead of him, which Lucifer begins to grab his chair and says, like hell he is. Now, this is where we're going to say another year, pretty much. Deku makes it to Pride. Now, pretty much, this is where female Pride, and this is where she looks like her demon form, but she will first look like a human to pretty much have Deku be off track. Now, this is where Deku pretty much has the cosmetic of style and says, well, so ain't you? So you're Pride, which pretty much Deku is saying that. This is where, and I should tell you what Deku looks like. So Deku doesn't have the attire of like a attire of any school uniform. He has a attire as like Dante's with the jacket thing. It from Devil May Cry. If y'all ever played Devil May Cry 3, he basically has Dante style from Devil May Cry 3, but he basically has Excalibur at the side of his back, kind of like Dante's, but he doesn't have two guns, so he's not going to be 100% off a bootlegger ripoff of Dante. He has the sword Excalibur on his back, but he does have Dante whole attire, except with the boots. Well, yeah, you could say he has boots, but he has bandages on his hand, and he basically don't have a shirt. But pretty much this, and the color instead of being red is going to be black. So it's going to be black and green. So yeah, this is where Deku pretty much opens up the door, and after he kills a lot of demons and taking their souls, he pretty much looking at saying, "So you must be Pride," which pretty much Pride looks at him and says, "So you're the one. So who are you?" Well, pretty much she says that, which pretty much Deku sees her naked body, and she's walking close to Deku, and she's pretty much saying, "You must have some guts, killing all my men, and also coming close to me," which pretty much she's touching him and stuff. And Deku's saying, "Well, I am here to get out of hell after all," which pretty much she says, "Get out of hell," which Deku says, "Yeah, indeed. So I think I'm going to be getting your power now," and he pretty much stabs Pride right in her stomach, which pretty much this is where Pride says, "That kind of not hurt it," and pretty much she takes it out, being prideful at, you could say. Now this is where she pushed Deku back, and Deku pretty much holds on, and stab the sword down to the ground, and pretty much looks up and saying, "Oh, look like you're mad." Which this is where pretty much she turns into her prideful form power. Now this is where she begins to start attacking Deku and stuff, and I'm just gonna say she has you could say the power of the sun, kind of like the seven deadly sins, but it's a little bit more different. She doesn't require of the sun. You could say she requires of the sun, but it's more like a different thing. It's a different power, but she basically has some sun power and lava, you could say. Now this is where Deku pretty much is dodging her attacks and stuff, and he's pretty much combating her. Now this is where she pretty much throws a lava fist punch at Deku and pretty much sends Deku flying back into a wall. This is where Deku says, "That hurt it like a bitch," and pretty much he hops off the wall. This is where she's about to do another move until Deku throws the Excalibur sword like a spear, and pretty much the Excalibur sword transforms as a spear and stabs straight through her, sending her flying to the wall and killing her right there. Now, as she gets killed, this is where Deku begins to absorb her power, and her power pretty much goes all the way in him, and he pretty much gets the power of pride. And this is where he gets like a golden chain around his neck. Well, yeah, a golden lace around his neck, you could say, in his gold. Which Deku says, "Huh, I don't feel any difference." Which pretty much this is where he begins to turn his hand into molten lava, and he realized that he can also control fire and stuff. Which he says, "Huh, this is pretty cool." Which he pretty much grabs his blade, the Excalibur. Well, yeah, and turns it back to a blade and pretty much walks off. Now, this is where he heads off to uh Gluttony. Yeah, this is where he heads off to Gluttony. And as he's heading off to Gluttony, yeah, he's pretty much heading off to there, and that takes about 2 years. But as he's going for 10 years, this is where he's hacking and slashing demons and stuff. This is where he pretty much, as he's going, oh, also, I should probably give y'all a heads up. Deku hair will be the same, but he will have much longer hair. Not like he'll pretty much have longer hair, kind of like a little bit of an afro hair, but curly. A little bit, not like curly, but like, you could say like a puff thing that you don't comb. And he will have like two long hair bangs by the side. So yeah. But pretty much this is where Deku is going. And he go inside to a stripper place, or a prostitution stripper place, and demons are pretty much just there, having drinks and stuff, partying and all that. And Deku pretty much, and I'm gonna say it's some humans too, some human guys, who's like made their stuff around. So they're there too, but some of them are servants and some of them are not servants. Some females are like humans, like as slaves and stuff. So yeah, this is where Deku's pretty much in there, and he's pretty much sits down and begins to start having to drink stuff and saying, oh, I need a break. Going going to try to fight this other thing is quite exhausting. Which pretty much this is where all the demons are looking at Deku. And Deku says, what? Are we all gonna have a party here? Or are y'all gonna keep fucking staring at me? Which pretty much this is where the demons growls at him, but they begin to look away and continue doing their own thing. This is where Deku pretty much goes to the bartender and says, can I get the location of Gluttony? Which pretty much the bartender says, like I know where the hell he's at. Well, we all know it's a demon bartender, and it's not telling Deku. This is where Deku pretty much throws down a gold coin saying, can you tell me? Which, a gold coin pretty much can get a demon anything he wants. So if he's desperate in that need, he can use that gold coin to get what he wants. Which, this is where the demon takes the gold coin and pretty much says, alright, I'll tell you where's his location. And pretty much writes it down and gives it to Deku. Which Deku pretty much takes it and puts it in his pocket and says, thanks. And he pretty much heads out. Now, as he's heading out, this is where he pretty much finds the location of Gluttony and pretty much heads inside. As he's heading inside, this is where a bunch of humans, well, we're going to say a couple of humans and a couple of demons are just straight up eating food and getting fat. Like, they're just eating a lot of food and stuff and all that. And also, as they're eating food, this is where Gluttony is pretty much, he's eating like a big meat leg, and he's pretty much saying, "Ah, so you're the one who killed my sister, Pride." Which pretty much he's saying that is saying, "I knew my sister was quite arrogant and prideful, but I didn't know she would be defeated." Which pretty much this is where Deku says, "Well, I'm gonna take your fat ass out too." Which this is where Gluttony says, "Huh, good luck with that." Which he pretty much snaps his finger, and the people who was pretty much sitting down, well, pretty much was laying down and stuff, begins to get up and turn into like a spiked ball and stuff. And this is where Gluttony gets up and he begins to grab the humans and turn them into like chain spikes, like a mace, you could say. It begins to start swinging it around and throwing it at Deku. This is where Deku pretty much blocks one of them, and he dodges the second one. This is where Deku realized that, well, pretty much switched the Excalibur blade into a shotgun, and begins to start shooting at the weapons and pretty much making them explode, which blood and guts is everywhere. Now, as that's happening, Deku pretty much switches into a giant sword and pretty much slash Gluttony's one of his legs, which he pretty much falls down. This is where Deku's pretty much going for another attack until Gluttony pretty much does switch his body into a spike ball and hardening his skin into like earth. Well, into like, you could say earth or not metal, and begins to start rolling around like a spike. This is where Deku is pretty much dodging him and running up walls by the side and begins to start um creating making the Excalibur into a bow and start shooting bows at arrows at him. This is where the arrows are not effective until Deku thinks about merging the ability and the Excalibur blade together and pretty much makes an arrow like fire arrows, well, lava arrows, and shoots the lava arrows into Gluttony. Now this is where it slows Gluttony down and he begins to unmeddling himself and saying and breathing out saying, "Damn you." Which this is where Deku pretty much says, "Yeah, damn you too," which he pretty much starts slashing Gluttony in half into multiple pieces, and he pretty much uses the lava to pretty much blast, well, melt his body slowly. Now as Gluttony body start melting slowly, this is where Deku gets Gluttony power. Now as he gets his power and his soul, this is where he also realizes he can turn into metal, and also can start using it. Starts to turn into metal, which he can also turn other weapons into metal, harden it into the hardest thing that he can think of, or he can turn it into well, you could say turn the metal into also electric, make it into electric weapon, or turn himself into an electric thing and flying around and stuff, which he's pretty much amazement and thinking this is badass. But he also realized that he's a little bit hungry. A little bit more hungry. Well, pretty much, yeah, hungry. But he doesn't mind that. He continues going. Now, this is going to take, like, I say, 3 more years. So, takes him 3 more years. And Deku has got more experience and more stronger over those 3 years by eating demons, souls, also going around, fighting ancient demons too, and pretty much just getting stronger as he's going to fight Ivory. Now, as he's going to fight Ivory, this is where he pretty much sees that Ivory is pretty much laughing hilariously and saying, this is going to be fun. Let's see him try to get past here. Which pretty much Deku is just naive, like sweating and just slicing and beating all the demons, including demons that's like armor. He's just ripping them in shreds and stuff. Now, as that's happening, this is where he, hold on. Sorry about that, guys. I just wanted to do my research to say the name right. Sorry, it's Envy. My bad. So Envy pretty much is pretty much looking, and he's pretty much have copied many people's desires. I mean, not desires. Well, pretty much, yeah, their traits, their abilities, and you could say desires. And also, they have been some criminal quirk users, so he has been taking people quirks. So, because Ivory, or, yeah, Ivory, or Envy, I gotta say the name right again. Sorry, Envy, yeah. Basically, Envy is a jealous person. Basically wants everything. Status, riches, intelligence, basically all that, you could say. Wants everybody everything, you could say. So Envy pretty much, he's sitting down, and he's pretty much looking through a future thing because he has a person quirk that can stop time and stuff, but also see in the future, and he's pretty much saying, look at that. So that's how. No, this is where I die. Which pretty much, as Deku is slicing his way and stuff, and he's heading aside. This is where one of the demons stops Deku and says, "Be careful of Envy." Pretty much, he explains that Envy has this weird power that he can see in the future for a couple seconds, or maybe more. He doesn't really know, but he knows how he's gonna die and stuff. And basically, Deku has to be unpredictable. Be unpredictable and charismatic, which pretty much Deku listens to the demon and says thanks, and pretty much stabs the demon in the head. which pretty much as that's happening, Deku begins to start going, and this is where Envy begins to say, huh, "So look like you killed all my guards. Congratulations, but you know you're not gonna win this, right?" Which pretty much Deku says, "Oh, I'm gonna win this." Which pretty much Deku turns his Excalibur blade into two guns, two Uzis, and he begins to start firing at Envy. Now this is where Envy begins to start dodging Deku attacks and stuff until Deku turns his Excalibur into a rocket launcher and begins to fire multiple missiles at it. And as he's firing, yeah, you could say a mini rocket launcher with multiple missiles. And as he's firing multiple missiles at Envy, this is where Envy begins to start using all his using his time manipulation abilities from a quirk, and he begins to start walking right past him, saying, "What's wrong?" Which pretty much Deku knows what the demon's talking about. Says, "All right, I think I got something for that." And this is where Deku begins to um, starts turning his body into metal and begins to start switching his Excalibur into a turret, which he's turning into a turret, which Deku knows has the imagination to do it, since you could say, pretty crazy and mad now. This is where he turns his Excalibur sword into a turret and begins to start letting the turret shoot at Envy. Now, as that's happening, this is where Deku begins to start running at Envy, and Envy pretty much sees the future of Deku trying to pretty much turn into a ball, which and trying to hit him, which pretty much Envy jumps back, and says, "Huh, I saw what you're gonna do. You're gonna turn into a ball," which Deku pretty much grabs him and hugs him and says, "No, I'm just gonna become a spike teddy bear," which he says, "What?" And pretty much stabs multiple spikes. Deku turns his body into a iron porcupine with lava, and pretty much pierces through Envy multiple times. Now, as that's happening, this is where Deku lets him go, and Envy hits the ground. As Envy pretty much is hitting the ground, he pretty much is laughing and saying, "I never thought I'd be defeated by a damn kid. Well, by a damn, yeah, you could say he calls him a kid just to taunt him, which Deku is, you could say, a little bit more older than he is, you could say now, because over the years now. This is where Deku says, "You call me a kid," which pretty much, this is where Envy says, "Nah, I guess you're not, but I guess I give you my power." And he pretty much just dies and let Deku have his power. Now, as Deku's getting his power, this is where Deku realized that he has all the powers that Envy has, that he took over the years, like over 1,000 and billion years, you could say. This is where Deku feels all the power. At first, he's about to fall down and pass out until he pulls himself together and calls back Excalibur to pull himself up, and he feels the power. This is where he realized he can stop time. He can also run incredibly fast, and he realized that he also has the strength of 1,000 men. Well, 1,000,000 men, 1,000,000,000 men, you could say. And he pretty much punched Envy Castle down, saying, "Not bad." Now, as that's happening, this is where a couple of demons throws spears at him. And as they throwing spears at him, this is where he looks straight at the spears, and this is where it immediately stops in front of him. And Deku realizes it's in slow, and he says, "Okay, nice." And he pretty much turns the spears back and pretty much throws them back at the demons, and they fall down to the ground. Pretty much getting sniped out the sky. Like 360 no scope out the sky. Now, this were another couple years now. And Deku begins to start going to Wrath. Now, this is where, as he's going to Wrath area, this is where he realized that everybody's just pissed off. Everybody's just in an ungrumpy rule. Just like the slaves, subjects, everything. Every demon, all pissed off. Fighting with each other. It's right. A, they're fighting each other, cussing each other out, or B, just having an aggressive sex with each other. Just having a whole angry sex of fighting, of punching each other while they're having sex. It's just a whole group. Whole Wrath shit. This is where Deku, as Deku's going in, this is where one of the demons realized that Deku is, you could say, new, and begins to start going to Deku. As the demon's saying, "Hey, piece of shit. Where do you think you're going? Which pretty much this is where Deku bitch slaps him, sending the demon flying all the way to the well, you could say lava, having the demon get burned up by the lava. Which pretty much Deku continues walking, which all the demons begins to stop and start charging at Deku. This is where Deku pretty much is slicing demons left, right, switching to guns, shooting demons, and also slicing them, and begins to start jumping on a demon head and begins to start firing rockets everywhere or throwing grenades everywhere. As that's happening, this is where Deku begins to start heading forward, and he pretty much makes it into Wrath Castle. As he opens up the door, this is where Wrath pretty much begins to get pissed off and throws a chair at Deku. This is where Deku slices the chair in half, and Wrath begins to say, "You piece of shit! How dare you come in my castle? How dare you?" Which pretty much Wrath is getting angrier. But as he gets angrier, he gets stronger. He gets stronger, faster. You pretty much all that. He's getting buffed by all stats, you could say. Think of it like that. As he's getting mad and furious at Deku, this is where Deku starts joking around saying, "Oh, what do you mean? I thought I was invited," which Wrath begins to say, "Don't play smartass with me, you piece of shit," and he begins to get even more angry and stuff, and begins to start punching the wall, just like in a whole pissed off mood. As that's happening, Deku begins to start saying, "It's not my fault," which pretty much this is where Wrath says, and he begins to start charging at Deku with quick speed, which Deku begins to immediately react with quick speed and dodge Wrath punch. As he dodges Wrath punch, this is where half of the castle of Wrath breaks apart, like start crumbling, and pretty much creates, pretty much he breaks half of the castle in half. This is where Deku says, "Whew, if that was me, I'll probably be dead." Which pretty much this is where Wrath says, "You're going to be dead, piece of shit," and begins to start swinging at Deku. As he's swinging at Deku, this is where Wrath does claw slashes left and right at Deku, which Deku dodges them, and Deku looks back and he sees the claw scratches slice straight through the castle, and he says, "Oh God." As Deku being sarcastic, this is where Wrath says, "Don't you dare bring his name into this," and he begins to start charging at Deku. As Deku is dodging Wrath attacks and stuff, this is where Wrath gets a clean cut off Deku's cheek, and Deku pretty much backs up and says, "Okay, I guess I'm gonna have to fight you hand to hand." Which pretty much Wrath says, "You dare believe me? You pity me?" Which pretty much this is where Wrath is pretty much charging at Deku. And as he charges at Deku, this is where he pretty much stabs Deku straight through with the claw. Which Deku coughs up blood, which Wrath says, "Not so cocky now, piece of shit." Which this is where Wrath gets stabbed in the back and Wrath begins to start coughing up blood. Well, you could say cough up. You could say vomit of blood and stuff. Well, yeah, we're gonna say blood and stuff. Well, black blood. And this is where Deku says, "And you were saying," which Wrath says, "Ow, ow," which Deku pretty much says, "You can thank Envy for that. He pretty much had a quirk where you can duplicate yourself, and you feel no pain of it." Which pretty much this is where Wrath says, "Damn you, Envy! I told you about trying to have everything." Which pretty much this is where Deku slices Wrath head, slices upward and pretty much splitting Wrath like a split banana, you could say. Now this is where Wrath pretty much falls on his knees and begins to start fading, while his soul and his power goes to Deku. Deku pretty much absorbs it, and he begins to have Wrath abilities. As pretty much he begins to feel a little bit pissed off. Well, feel a little bit mad. But he begins to start controlling it and saying, let's see this. And this is where he thinks of something mad of his, well, you could say his life before he died. And he's pretty much thinking about the killers who shot him. And he pretty much sliced through the wall, pretty much creating a whole crater crack. Like a clean slice and slicing all the way straight to a mountain, slicing the mountain in half. And he pretty much says, "Not bad. Not bad at all." And he begins to put the sword on his back and continue going. Now, as he's going, this is where he meets up with Sloth. And as he's going, this is where he makes it to the Sloth area, and that takes a couple more years. So that takes about 5 years now. Now, as that taking 5 years, and Deku's pretty much heading to Sloth. Let's switch back to where's his body now. Now, pretty much, this is where Inko has now been less seeing Deku because now she has to work at pretty much 2 jobs now. And, well, no, she's working at a whole science facility now. So, pretty much, she left Deku to pretty much went to become a scientist, you could say. And to pretty much find a cure to Deku in his visible state, you could say. Now, this is where Deku's mom is pretty much is working real hard and pretty much doing a lot of things to try to help out Deku. And she's making breakthroughs, like not big breakthroughs, but she's pretty much making breakthroughs of quirks, of having people available to use quirks now, or to unlock their quirk that they were supposed to have, and she's just doing her best to try to help out Deku, and she's doing funding and stuff, and also making like we're gonna say like weapons, not like bio like not weapons to kill everybody, like no weapons to contain villains and stuff, you could say. And pretty much as she's doing that, she pretty much is going to go see go see Deku to see how's he doing and stuff, to talk to him, you know, to stay determined until she realized that Deku's not there no more. This is where she asks where's Deku at, and pretty much this is where the doctor said, "Oh, a guy came in and pretty much says that he's his son," which pretty much Inko says that he doesn't have a father. His father left long ago, which pretty much this is where the doctor says, "Oh shit," and pretty much they trying to go find Deku, which Inko is devastating, but she stayed determined and go back to the lab until the police can contact her and let her know where's Deku at. Now, where's Deku body? You could say this is where Deku body is pretty much at a sacralition coat, you could say. Now, this is where a sacralition coat is pretty much putting Deku body in a test tube, and pretty much is putting demon blood into Deku. You could say, yeah, demon blood into Deku. And what kind of demon blood is it? It's Lucifer blood. So, yeah. Now, as they're doing that, pretty much we switch back to Deku. Now, this is where Deku is pretty much at sloth territory. Yeah, this guy. And pretty much he is going in there. Now, as he's going in there, he pretty much sees a bunch of, souls and stuff. And a bunch of demons are just sleeping around. Sleeping or just, too tired to do anything. Just absolutely not doing anything. And nothing. You could say they're just all fucking, just, you could say sloth, lazy. And just tired of shit. And napping. This is where Deku begins to just walk past all the demons and stuff. And this is where Sloth begins to say, I heard you killed all the other deadly sins. All the sins. I'm quite impressed, Deku. Which pretty much Deku says, yeah, quite impressed indeed. Which this is where Deku begins to start yawning and stuff. And pretty much Sloth says, you tired? Which pretty much Deku says, nah, just a little bit. And he begins to start getting tired and stuff. And as he's getting tired, this is where he says, I think I'm going to sit down for a bit, and begins to start dazing off, which Sloth says, have a good sleep, Deku. Or should I say sleep for eternity? Which pretty much as Deku's closing his eyes and sleeping, this is where Sloth begins to get up and walk down, and begins to go in Deku's mind, you could say, to see, or to try to get all the other Sid's powers and stuff. He is going to try to transfer and attract memories and everything from Deku like that. Because Sloth uses his power to put Deku to sleep. Now, as he's going in there, this is where Deku is having one of his memories of that shooting thing. And pretty much he's trying to figure out many ways to try to, like, what could he did. And he's pretty much blaming himself onto it. Now, as that's happening, this is where Sloth is pretty much finding the source. And this is where Deku realized that he's sleeping and he was supposed to kill Sloth. This is where Deku wakes back up and grabs the blade and stabs Sloth, which Sloth begins to start coughing up blood. And he begins to hold the blades, having the blade straight through him. And Deku begins to say, what was you trying to do? Which pretty much Sloth is saying, I might as well tell you since you got me. I was gonna go in your memories and your dreams and take all the information, also your power, and pretty much kill you off. Which pretty much this is where Deku says, that's quite interesting. But maybe later on, or maybe not. And pretty much slices pulls the blade out of Sloth and pretty much set Sloth on fire with lava. Burn him and turn him to a skeleton with lava. As that happened, this is where Sloth soul begins to go inside Deku. And this is where Deku begins to get Sloth power. Now, as he gets Sloth power, this is where one of the demons are getting up and begins to about to attack Deku until Deku looks at the demon. The demon begins to start falling asleep, and Deku starts taking the demon's soul without touching him and saying, so that's how it works. And he begins to start just walking past demons and stuff and taking their soul. So he doesn't need to touch them. He doesn't need to get close to them. He can just take their soul by just putting them to sleep. And he can get that power and stuff. This is where Deku begins to start heading off. And he heads off to pretty much Greed now. Now, as he's heading to Greed area, this is where pretty much as he's going and looking around, and like I said, this takes a couple more years. So as he's going, he pretty much goes into greed area, you could say, or jurisdiction, you could say. Now as he's going there, he pretty much sees people pretty much screaming, falling into or drowning in pool of gold. They can't get out, kind of like quicksand. Half of the people was falling down on gold like plat, and they get drowned by gold. And pretty much they're just screaming. This is where pretty much demons are in gold armor and pretty much about to stop Deku until Greed says let him pass, and pretty much this is where he gets let pass. Now as he's going in, this is where Greed pretty much is counting money and stuff, and he's typing on you could say a board to count up all the money and stuff. And as he's doing it, he's pretty much typing and saying, I heard he was coming here. And as he's typing the money and stuff, he says, and that's 1,000,000,001. Okay. And he begins to start counting more money. As he's doing that, this is where Deku says, you quite a greedy son of a bitch. Which pretty much Greed is saying, thank you. I take that title with respect. Which pretty much saying, and you're prideful. Which Greed saying, no, I'm just quite grateful that you noticed my talent. Which this is where Deku is about to come a little bit closer until Greed pretty much hold Deku still, with pretty much trapping him with gold sand. Well, gold, you could say gold sand and stuff. And pretty much turning the sand into pure gold. So he could pretty much have magnetic / sand abilities. So kind of like that. Kind of like gold dust, but it's much different. Which pretty much not as it's kind of like a combination. All right, it's kind of like a combination One Piece, like that guy ability where he can pretty much do that. It's kind of like a Logia, but not at the same time. Well, yeah, kind of like a Logia. So it's a combination of Logia, gold dust, and magnetic. So yeah, and he can manipulate gold. So yeah, he can turn gold wherever he wants it to be, and he can make things gold. So kind of like that. Now this is where pretty much this is where pretty much Greed is still counting his money, and he begins to get up and starts counting more money, and he starts talking to Deku at the same time. He starts saying, you see, you're not going to win against me because there's one thing you pretty much thought you would have against me. A, you would think I would just be some type of person who would not think about his situations and think he's cocky and stuff. And B, you pretty much came up to the wrong person, kid. Which pretty much this is where he's about to touch Deku until pretty much Deku starts to turn his whole body into lava and begins to start melting the gold. This is where he pretty much punched Greed in the face, sending him flying into a change of a lot of gold. And Greed begins to get up, says, that kind of hurt it. Which Greed's jaw is broken, which Greed pretty much fixes his jaw and turns his jaw into gold. Like his bottom jaw into gold and says, alright, let's fight then. Which, this is where Greed begins to get in, he creates gold knuckle dusters, and he begins to create a gold bat saying, with spikes, and says, let's go then, and starts charging at Deku. This is where Deku begins to start fighting him with Excalibur blade, and begins to start, combating him and stuff. This is where pretty much Greed punched Deku, throws a punch at Deku, which Deku dodges and pretty much knees Greed in the face, which Greed pretty much looks back at him and says, nice try, that won't work on me again, which pretty much Deku says, I know it won't work, which pretty much Deku backs up and does a roadhouse kick, kicking Greed in the face, sending him into a wall again. This is where Deku pretty much turns the Excalibur blade into a revolver and pretty much starts shooting 12 bullets at Greed's head, which pretty much Greed gets the first bullet in his head, and pretty much Greed hurry up and turns his whole skull, his head, his whole face into he creates a golden skull helmet, which pretty much Deku says, oh, that won't work, and he starts firing more bullets at Greed and turning the bullets into lava bullets. So the bullets are pretty much piercing, making a hole, and Deku pretty much says, bullseye, and shoots one more bullet, which he turns the bullet into ice and begins to have the bullet hits Greed skull and all the way to the brain. Now this is where Greed says, damn it, and he pretty much freezes into ice, which Deku says, and you're done for, which he creates the Excalibur into a bat and pretty much breaks Greed into ice. Shatters Greed into pieces. Now after he shatters Greed into pieces, this is where he gets Greed's soul and begins to start feeling Greed's power and stuff. Now as he feels Greed's power, he begins to start manipulating the gold and stuff around him, and he pretty much creates have the gold be on the sides and stuff. So like the belt will be gold, his laces and the rings on them will be gold and stuff, and also his little tie things for his side hair, his long side hair things, you could say, is pretty much with the gold too. And he pretty much have a ring. He has a ring. Yeah, he pretty much has 3 rings: bronze, gold, silver, and platinum. Well, no, not platinum, but yeah, pretty much those 3 rings. Which he pretty much says, cool. And pretty much he starts leaving, and as he leaves, this is where all the gold pretty much fused with Excalibur. So Excalibur blade is now unique golden, you could say, with a golden hilt. Has a golden hilt, and the blade is like half gold, half silver, you could say. And he begins to start going. Now as he's going, this is where he heads to the next area and his final destination, and it's to Lust. Now I might have to make this 18. I might have to age resist this. If y'all don't see the video and it gets demonetized or something like that, I will make it 18 plus, and then I will repost it out so y'all can see it, okay? But if y'all can see it, congrats. Let's continue the story. Pretty much, this is where Deku takes another couple more years, and he makes it to the final area. Now, as he's making it to the final area, this is where he pretty much sees the final, you could say, area where Lust is at. Now, as he's pretty much at the final area, this is where he sees a bunch of, you could say, an orgy. There's a bunch of sex everywhere. people sticking dicks in vaginas and mouths, and you could say it's just a whole clusterfuck. So guys doing guys, girls doing girls, or guys doing guys and girls doing guys and girls, and it's just a whole orgy. This is a whole orgy. This is a whole big orgy of fucking. You could say. Now, as that's happening, Deku begins to start looking around and saying, now this is my kind of party a little bit. A little bit too much of the guy action, a guy action, but women? This is quite nice. Now, this is where Deku begins to start going inside, and he begins to start looking around, and this is where lust is pretty much you could say in a little bit of an orgy with women and stuff. And you could say it's one guy getting pleasure, but also it's like kind of that satanic a little bit. So the guy got a little cuts and scratch on his back and stuff, but he's getting the pleasure, like the max pleasure of it. So this is where you hear a bunch of little bit of moans and stuff and all that. You could say I'm not gonna moan. I'm not gonna give you a moan. So y'all can be like, wow, that guy moaned. Like, no, I'm not gonna give you that. We're just gonna continue. But pretty much this is where Deku begins to start saying, wow, this is this is what we do here? Which pretty much less is she's grabbing herself and saying, you could say this is the pleasurable place, which pretty much Deku says, ah, so this is the pleasurable place. I might want to join in, which pretty much Les says, oh, I'll be glad for you to join in, which pretty much Deku points a gun at her and says, or maybe this, and he shoots a bullet right at her. Now, as she gets shot in her head, this is where she pretty much takes the bullet out and she begins to regenerate, saying, oh, that won't work on me, which pretty much Deku says, ah, shit. And pretty much this is where she begins to grab Deku, well, uses a whip, you could say, and pretty much sends Deku flying into the wall, which Deku begins to pretty much says, ugh, that hurt it. It begins to come out the wall. Now, this is where Deku begins to drop down, and he begins to start having his battle with Lust. Now, Lust abilities, pretty much simple. She can make people have, you could say, lustful desires and stuff. She can also see what desires they want. So, like, what kind of desires they. She kind of has like Lucifer a little bit desires. So, like, if she asks what's your desire, they will say like what dirty desire they want, and pretty much she can give that pleasurable desire, or she can make you do it. So yeah, and also she has telekinesis. So yeah, she can pretty much kind of like saying telekinesis, like move around left to right and teleport and stuff. Now, sorry, she begins to grab Deku and sends him flying to the wall again, up and down and stuff, which Deku begins to start shooting an arrow, well, a crossbow at her with a golden crossbow and begins to hit her in the arm, which she pretty much leaves it in there, says, I just regenerate over it and just leave it in there as a souvenir when I get rid of you, which pretty much Deku says, you're going to regret that, which pretty much Deku is trying to come at her, which she pretty much pushes him back or just teleport. As she's teleporting, she's laughing, saying, how can you possibly beat me, which pretty much this is where Deku begins to hit the ground and pretty much fall on his knees, saying, which this is where Lust gets cocky and she begins to come down and she begins to get Deku and picks him up, and she has her hand under his chin, saying, maybe we should have a good time before you die, which pretty much Deku is saying, nah, you're gonna be done anyways, which she pretty much is saying, what do you mean? Which Deku pretty much lifts up his hand and snaps his finger. And pretty much as he does that, this is where she starts very quickly turning into gold. So she can't move or do anything. As she's trying to figure out what the hell happened, she realized that she left the crossbow by the side of her arm. And as she's about to try to grab for Deku, this is where she immediately turns gold. And he pretty much says, and that's it. As that's happened, this is where pretty much all the demons and stuff is still doing their orgies and stuff. And pretty much Deku gets less power. Now, as Deku gets less power, he begins to feel the power go through him, and he begins to go to a little bit of a tight, a little bit painful transformation, but he gets her power. This is where he starts gaining muscles, physical teeth, a more handsome face, and realize that he has a fit body and saying, "Huh, not bad." Which all the girls who's in the castle begins to walk up to Deku, crawl to him, and they begins to start hopping up on him and stuff, and says, "Come, come, have some fun with us." Which pretty much Deku says, "Well, I can't refuse the lady," and he pretty much have sex with all of them and bust a nut. Now after that, this is where Deku gets dressed and stuff, and he begins to start grabbing for his sword, and he realized that he can have the sword teleport to him and stuff. And he begins to teleport out the castle and begins to start fly, uh, falling down. As he's falling down, this is where he creates golden wings and starts flying away and starts heading to Lucifer Castle. Now this is, you could say, the final part, and he starts heading to Lucifer Castle. Now as he's heading to Lucifer Castle, he begins to start slicing demons in his way, shooting at them with the Uzi, and begins to start just firing everywhere and stuff, having a whole gunslinger battle. Well, yeah, with the demons. Now, as he's shooting at the demons, this is where he pretty much lands down. It begins to start opening up the door. Now, as that's happening, this is where, Lucifer is pretty much sitting at his throne and saying, "Well, well, well, look like you're here to pretty much get out of hell. Am I right, Deku?" Which pretty much Deku looks at Lucifer and doesn't say anything. And he begins to start sighing and saying, which Lucifer said, "Are you sighing?" Which pretty much Deku starts saying, "Yeah, I pretty much am sighing. I thought you would say something, I don't know, crazy, cocky, or probably, I don't know, say something dramatic so I can say something cosmetic back. But you pretty much just says, look like I came out of hell. What the hell is that?" Which Deku says that. This is where pretty much Lucifer gets pissed off and says, "You such arrogant little shit," and begins to start getting up. This is where Lucifer pretty much begins to spread out his wings and says, "I'm going to kill you. And once I stab you, I'm going to chain you up. And once I chain you, I'm going to torture you for billions of years." Which Deku begins to start saying, "Yeah, yeah, yeah," and begins to start having his battle with Lucifer. Now, as he's have his battle with Lucifer, this is where Lucifer is fighting him with the demon sword, and Deku's pretty much fighting him with the Excalibur blade. Now, as he's fighting with Lucifer with the Excalibur blade, this is where Lucifer gets a little bit of the upper hand with Deku, and pretty much stabs Deku straight to the chest and sends him flying into a couple meters. You could say a couple meters away. And Deku pretty much crashes down. Now, this is where Deku's getting up, and he's healing up, regenerating. And this is where Deku says, "Damn, he with all this deadly sense power, I'm not simple strong enough for him." Which pretty much this is where Lucifer is flying to him and saying, "Oh, Deku," which pretty much this is where Deku's about to block it, but it's too late, and Lucifer stabs straight through him, pinning Deku straight down to the ground. As Deku's down to the ground, this is where Lucifer begins to, taunt Deku, saying, "You're not even strong enough. And do you actually think you can get out of hell? I am the king here, the prince," which pretty much as that he's taunting and stuff. This is where Deku is this is where pretty much Lucifer lifts out the blade and pretty much takes the Excalibur, but realize Excalibur is refusing him and saying, "Damn sword. Even though I put my angelic grace in it, I can still wield you." Which pretty much Deku is about to get back up until Lucifer stabs him with the Excalibur blade. Now, as he stabs Deku with the Excalibur blade to pretty much hold down Deku, this is where Lucifer begins to start about to grab his demons to come get Deku, until Deku pretty much, since Deku's soul is hurt, it's not as corrupted. It still has a light. So the Excalibur blade plus angelic grace, you could say, in the you could say a soul before it got like pure 100% corrupted, which Deku's soul wasn't 100% corrupted yet, only like 99. So when the sword hit Deku, the angelic race and Deku's soul, you could say, fused together. So Deku, you could say, is a sinner slash now archangel. You could say. So he's half demon and archangel. You could say. Now this is where Deku begins to take the sword out of him, and he begins to start transforming. This is where Deku begins to grow a black and white horns at one side and the other side, and his hair begins to turn in half black, half white, and he begins to grow a halo. And the halo is completely, you could say, angelic, and he begins to sprout one wing, like one wing of a devil and one wing of Lucifer wing. You could say Lucifer angelic wing. Now this is where Lucifer says, "What? How do you have my angelic grace?" Which this is where Deku says, "I don't know, piece of shit. Well, I think this is the end for you." And pretty much this is where Lucifer gets sliced in half. Which, as that happened, this is where Lucifer says, "No!" And Deku pretty much uses all the Deadly Sins power and combine them as one, and pretty much shoots Lucifer with the gun, sending him, blowing him into pieces. And it's gonna take Lucifer a couple, you could say, billions and billions years to regenerate. As that happened, this is where Deku pretty much goes to Lucifer Castle and pretty much is tired, and he pretty much sees the thing where he can leave heaven. Leave hell. Sorry. This is where he pretty much touches it. It pretty much his soul gets teleported all the way back to Earth and going straight back to his body. Now this is where his body is in his two chambers, and he's pretty much getting Lucifer blood fused in him, and the pretty much the place and the church worshippers are pretty much, well, the Satan worshippers are pretty much saying Lucifer is going to be happy with his body. Which this is as that happening, Deku begins to go back into his body. Now, since Deku has all the powers and stuff of all the seven deadly sins and stuff, and also Lucifer angelic grace, and also his blood now. So pretty much he has Lucifer power of the desire and stuff, and pretty much creating things, and also mess with people, illusions and possessing. He can basically do all that stuff. Now, as that's happening, this is where a crash happens, and pretty much an explosion happens, and blows up the whole center and place. Which this is where people are calling, saying that they heard an explosion, and the firefighters and police station is pretty much going to that area. This is where Deku pretty much gets out the rubble, and his hair is pretty much the same as he had in Hell, but he's pretty much naked. This is where Deku pretty much is looking around and saying, "Where the hell am I?" And he's pretty much in a daze, but he remembers, and he pretty much saying, "I'm back." And he pretty much smiles. This is where he pretty much says that he's gonna go to his mom and pretty much make things right. And he starts heading to his home. Now, as he's heading to this area and leaves the area, this is where one of the scented cult, or the cult leaders, is still alive and looking and saying, "You," which he pretty much is trying to reach out to Deku, but he pretty much passes out. Now this is where Deku is pretty much walking through his neighborhood, and pretty much he's knocking on the door where his mom is supposed to be at, which his mom is not answering because she's at the lab facility. And this is where he's pretty much naked. He says, "Oh, I can just go to Bakugo's mom house," and he pretty much says she always thought of fond of me and me being good until I went bad, and he begins to start heading there. Now this is where he knocks on the door, and she pretty much says, "Oh, who is it?" Which she pretty much sees it's Deku, and she says, Mizuki," which pretty much as she looks down, she pretty much sees Deku Long's penis, you could say. And she begins to cover her eyes and say, "Oh my god," which pretty much Deku says, "Can you let me in? And also, can I get some clothes?" Which she pretty much lets him in. This is where Deku's pretty much sitting on the couch and pretty much turning on the TV and enjoying TV and laughing, which pretty much she asks him, so where was he? His mom was looking for him. They said he was out of the hospital. Well, he was gone, which pretty much Deku doesn't even know himself where he was at, but he lies because he doesn't want to say he was in hell for like eternity and shit. So he pretty much says that he doesn't really remember and stuff, and she pretty much explained to him that he was in a coma. So of course he wouldn't know where he was at. This is where Deku pretty much puts on the clothes, and she's pretty much, well, about to say, this is where he talks to her more and stuff, and this is where Deku still haven't, well, he haven't really been controlling. He just got the Lucifer powers and stuff. This is where she begins to start saying her desire and stuff, and she pretty much says that she wants to have sex with him, and pretty much wants to try out his inch penis. Which this is where Deku is about to refuse, but he he begins, like I said, he's a sinner, so he begins to say what the hell, and he pretty much gives it to her. Now I'm pretty much going to talk about the sex scene because might as well on the final part. I mean, this is going to be a part one, so this is a long part one, so I might as well go into sex details. This is where Deku is pretty much sucking her boobs and stuff, and he begins to start putting the inch, well, pretty much wear protection, and puts the inch in there, and he begins to start, going in and out, back and forth, and all that. Now, as he's doing that, this is where he pretty much takes it out, and she begins to start sucking him off, and he pretty much, she gives him the good 9,000, and as that's happening, this is where he done nut on the sauce on her face. Now, as that happened, this is where Deku pretty much let her sleep in the bed, and he pretty much goes back downstairs, and start drinking an alcohol drink, some booze. Now, as he's drinking some booze, this is where Bakugo comes home and says, "Mom, I'm home," which pretty much, as he says that, he sees Deku, and Deku pretty much looks at Bakugo, and they look at each other, and Deku begins to start smiling and say, "Sup, Kashan?" Which pretty much, as he says that, pretty much Bakugo starts getting pissed off and says, "Deku." Which, this is part one of What If Deku Was a Sinner. If you like, let's get this up to like a hot, alright, so I'm gonna be honest. So 20 likes, 30 likes, it will be for like Monday because I won't be going to work. And 50 likes and I will do it tonight or later on in the day. So if we can get to 230, I will do it on Monday. But if we get 50 or 40, I will do it later on today of part 2 of What If Deku Was a Sinner. Now, if you like, do those likes goals. And if we can get it, then we can do it, alright? But I'm Keyshawn Chia. Thanks for watching and peace out.
Looks like you lost another one.